Pollution, fog, smog, mist, respiratory problems. Hey, world is going to change and recover from all these problems. Air will clear, dawn will freshen up. We will live happily ever after. Good news are there in the offing. For good news, News Analysis. News Analysis, a weekly magazine on current affairs. We will begin it with the headlines. Impeachment Inquiry, Trump directed Ukraine pressure, Sondland. Johnson & Johnson loses vaginal mesh class action. Florida, 145 graves of an African American cemetery found under school. U.S. federal execution halted over potentially unlawful methods. Essex lorry deaths, money raised for Vietnamese victims' families. Delhi pollution, the bars selling oxygen to choking city. UK to repatriate first citizens from northeastern Syria. Now we will go to the stories in detail. Impeachment Inquiry, Trump directed Ukraine pressure, Sondland. A top U.S. diplomat has told an impeachment inquiry that he followed President Donald Trump's orders to put pressure on Ukraine to investigate his Democratic rival Joe Biden. The instruction came from Mr. Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Ambassador Gordon Sondland said, "The inquiry is assessing if Mr. Trump withheld military aid to Ukraine as a precondition. He denies any wrongdoing. Mr. Biden is one of the top contenders for the Democratic nomination for the 2020 presidential election." Mr. Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, told the latest hearing in the U.S. House of Representatives that Mr. Giuliani had sought a public statement from Ukraine's leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, announcing an inquiry into the corruption issues. If found guilty in a majority vote in the House, the Republican president will face an impeachment trial in the Senate. But two-thirds of the members of that Republican-controlled chamber would then need to vote Mr. Trump to be removed from the office. In his opening statement, he said he had worked with Mr. Giuliani at the express direction of the president. While he is the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, Mr. Sondland said his brief included work on Ukraine alongside other colleagues, despite that country not being a European Union member. "We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we played the hand we were dealt. We all understood that if we refused to work with Mr. Giuliani, we would lose an important opportunity to cement relations between the United States and Ukraine. So we followed the president's orders," he added. He then confirmed the president had sought an investigation in exchange for a White House visit for Mr. Zelensky, a quid pro quo, a favor in return for a favor. "I know that members of this committee have frequently framed these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes," he confirmed. Johnson & Johnson loses vaginal mesh class action. More than 1,350 Australian women have won a long-running class action lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson, J&J, over vaginal mesh implants. Australia's federal court found that J&J, Johnson & Johnson, a subsidiary Ethicon, failed to warn patients and surgeons about the risk posed by the products. The case is one of a series of lawsuits J&J faces over the products. Some patients said they had suffered chronic pain, bleeding, and severe discomfort during sexual intercourse after having the mesh surgically implanted. Judge Anna Katzman ruled that much of the information the company provided about the product was inaccurate and at times made false representations. The risks were known, not insignificant, and on Ethicon's own admission, serious harm could ensue if they eventuated, Ms. Kussman said in her ruling. Asbestos discovery triggers J&J baby powder recall. In a statement, Ethicon defended its record and said it would consider an appeal. Ethicon believes that the company acted ethically and responsibly in the research, development and supply of these products, the company said. Julie Davis, the original claimant in the case, welcomed the decision of the court. They have treated women essentially like guinea pigs, lied about it, and done nothing to help, she told reporters outside the court in Sydney. Last year, the Australian government issued a national apology to women affected by vaginal mesh, acknowledging decades of agony and pain. The ruling is the latest bad news for J&J Johnson & Johnson, which is facing billions of dollars in legal claims over other products, including opioids, baby care products, and things like that. In October, the company agreed to pay nearly $117 million to resolve the claims over pelvic mesh in 41 U.S. states and the District of Columbia. It is also facing lawsuits over the product in Canada, Europe, and many other countries of the world. Separately, Johnson & Johnson is facing thousands of lawsuits from people who claim its talc products cause cancer. The multinational was also ordered to pay $8 billion in damages to a man over claims he was not warned that an antipsychotic drug could lead to breast growth. Despite the lawsuit, the company booked $20.7 billion in quarterly sales in its most recent results, an increase of 1.9% over the same quarter in 2018. Florida, 145 graves of an African American cemetery found under school. The graves of 145 people have been discovered under a high school in Tampa in the U.S. state of Florida. They are part of Ridgewood Cemetery, a mid-20th century cemetery for the poor. The coffins, buried 3 to 5 feet deep, were discovered using ground-penetrating radar after the school was alerted about the possible location of the cemetery. Records indicate more than 250 people were burned there, most of them African Americans, the school district said. Up to 77 of them were infants or small children. The city opened Ridgewood in 1942 and sold it off to a private company in 1957. The school district acquired the land in 1959, opening King High School in 1960. Today, the site consists of open land and the school's agriculture building. Plans are being made to have the building removed, according to School District Superintendent Jeff Eakins. We want to make sure that the folks buried at this site are honored, he said. While the radar used can't confirm what exactly is under the surface, the patterns of the findings match historical records of the cemetery. As for the graves that have not been accounted for, some may have been moved or not picked up by the radar because they have deteriorated, or in the case of children, their small size. I'm sick of this. This hurts me deeply. I just can't stand the sight of it. Vivek Lewis, president of the local branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, was quoted as saying by the Tampa Bay Times, U.S. federal executions halted over potentially unlawful method. Federal executions in the U.S. have been halted over concerns that the method of carrying them out may be unlawful. 5 men were due to be executed in Indiana in December and January after the federal government earlier this year moved to resume executions. But a judge ruled that 4 inmates' legal challenges to the method of execution were likely to succeed. The execution of a fifth man was already halted in a separate court ruling last month. On Wednesday, District Judge Tanya S. Tutkan said the four men would be irreparably harmed if they were to be put to death without being given the opportunity to have a court hear their case. Their argument revolves around the lethal injection that would be used. Attorney General William Barr's announcement earlier this year lifted an informal moratorium on federal executions, as opposed to state-directed executions that have been in place since 2003. That moratorium was in place because of a series of court rulings against the common method of execution, which involved a cocktail of 3 different drugs in one injection. In July, Mr. Barr directed the Department of Justice to use a single drug instead, pentobarbital. The drug is a potent sedative that slows down the body, including the nervous system, to the point of death. But in her ruling, Judge Tutkan said this would go against federal law, stipulating that death row inmates should be executed in the manner prescribed by the state of conviction. That is, using the same method that the particular state, in this case Indiana, uses for state-directed executions. The FDPA, Federal Death Penalty Act, provides no exceptions to this rule and does not contemplate the establishment of a separate federal execution procedure, she said. Federal and state execution, what is the difference? Under the U.S. justice system, crimes can be tried either in federal courts at a national level or state courts at a regional level. Certain crimes such as counterfeiting currency or mail theft are automatically tried at a federal level, as are cases in which the United States is a party or those which involve constitutional violations. Others are tried in federal courts based on the severity of the crimes. The death penalty was outlawed at state and federal levels by a 1972 Supreme Court decision that canceled all existing death penalty statutes. A 1976 Supreme Court decision reinstated the death penalty to a number of states. And in 1988, the government passed legislation that made the death penalty available again at a federal level. According to data collected by the Death Penalty Information Center, 78 people were sentenced to death in federal cases between 1988 and 2018, but only 3 have since been executed. There are 62 inmates currently on federal death row. Essex lorry deaths, money raised for Vietnamese victims' families. Essex lorry deaths, money raised for Vietnamese victims' families. More than $110,000 has been crowdfunded to help support the families of 39 Vietnamese people who died being smuggled into the UK. The victims were found dead in a refrigerated lorry in the southern English county of Essex last month. The money will be used to help pay for the cost of flying the bodies back to the families in Vietnam. Vietnam's government has offered loans to relatives, some of whom told the reporters they will struggle to cover the costs. Repatriation of a body will cost each family more than 66.2 million Vietnamese dong, around $2,856, according to the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. If the body has been cremated beforehand, the cost is about 2/3 of that. On Monday, when news of the loans emerged, some of the families of 39 victims told the reporters borrowing the money to fly the bodies home would leave them further in debt. Pham Ngoc Thuan, brother of one of the victims, told the press, "We already had to borrow so much money. We had to mortgage what we had. I don't know if we can borrow any more." Several Vietnamese organizations have helped to raise money for the families of the victims. One GoFundMe page has raised more than $17,000 out of a target of goal of $40,000. They aim to give $1,000 to each family. Vin Group, the biggest listed firm in Vietnam, has confirmed it will also donate 20 million VND to each of the 39 families. According to Sasha Mai, one of the organizations of the funding efforts, other campaigns have raised more than $60,000 collectively. These were organized by the Association of Nye and People in the German capital of Berlin and the Vietnamese Association of Birmingham in the UK. The Vietnamese government has not yet confirmed when the bodies of the victims will start to be repatriated. The discovery of the 39 bodies in a refrigerated lorry in the town of Grays led to the launch of the largest murder investigation in the Essex police force's history. The dead were 8 women and 31 men. 10 teenagers, including 2 15-year-old boys, were among the victims. Pham Thi Tra Mi, 26, was also among the victims who have been identified. Her family received a final mobile text message from her at 21:30 GMT on 22nd October. "I'm really sorry, Mom and Dad. My trip to a foreign land has failed," it read. "I'm dying. I can't breathe. I love you very much, Mom and Dad. I'm sorry, Mother." Delhi pollution, the bars selling oxygen to choking city. Delhi residents desperate for a breath of fresh air in the midst of the city's toxic pollution crisis have found somewhere to turn an oxygen bar. But with a price tag of 300 rupees, that's around $4 for 15 minutes of oxygen, it's an extravagance for most in India's smog-filled capital. In many parts of northern India, air quality has deteriorated into the hazardous category with the potential to cause respiratory illness. The authorities have been forced to shut down schools, halt construction, and restrict vehicles on the roads in Delhi. Levels of dangerous particles in the air, known as PM 2.5, are well over 10 times safe limits in the capital, and a car rationing system have been introduced in response. Judges accuse authorities of passing the buck. India's top court has accused state governments of passing the buck on air pollution and failing to take action to tackle Delhi's toxic smog. The Supreme Court said authorities were only interested in gimmicks rather than concrete measures to combat pollution levels. Delhi is shocking every year and we are unable to do anything, said Supreme Court Justice Arun Mishra. The state machinery is not acting, they are passing the buck to each other. Everybody is acting interested in gimmicks and elections. From 4 to 15 November, cars with odd or even number plates will only be allowed on the roads on alternate days, officials said. Such a system has been used before, but it's not clear if it helps lower pollution levels. UK to repatriate first citizens from northeastern Syria. The UK government is to repatriate the first British citizens from the area of northeastern Syria, formerly under the control of the Islamic State (IS) group, the press has learned. For security reasons, the press people cannot provide further details of the repatriation. The individuals being brought out of the region will be returned to the UK in the coming days. The UK has been reluctant to take back citizens from the area. IS once controlled 88,000 square kilometers of the territory, stretching from western Syria to eastern Iraq. The fate of foreign IS fighters and other foreigners caught up in the conflict has been a key issue since the defeat of the extremist group was declared in March 2019. The United Nations has said countries should take responsibility for their own citizens unless they are to be prosecuted in Syria in accordance with international standards. Human Rights Watch has described government-facilitated repatriations of foreign nationals as piecemeal. It says more than 1,200 foreign nationals have been repatriated from both Syria and Iraq to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Russia, Kosovo and Turkey. UK election, Corbyn promises real change in election pledge. Labour launches its election manifesto entitled "It's Time for Real Change." It includes a windfall tax on oil companies as part of plans for a low-carbon green economy. Other policies unveiled included a pledge to build 100,000 new council homes a year by 2024. The party also set out its plans for another Brexit referendum and more cash for the NHS. Meanwhile, the Conservatives pledged to deliver 1 million homes over 5 years and help first-time buyers. The Conservatives will also promise an extra 1 billion a year for social care in the manifesto, party sources say. The Lib Dems campaigning will focus on implications of Brexit on the creative industries. Addressing a pensioners club in Dudley, where he is on a visit after unveiling the party's manifesto, Jeremy Corbyn says it has been immediately challenged by many in the media who say it's too expensive, too big, it is too demanding, it's too radical. Jeremy Corbyn touches on some of the proposals he covered in the manifesto of launch, including on the NHS and education, and he urges his supporters to read the manifesto, understand it and campaign on it. Because we have got the fight on our lives on to win this election. Labour was the second biggest party in the House of Commons during the 2017-2019 Parliament. There were 243 Labour MPs out of 650 at the dissolution of Parliament on 6th of November. This does not include a number of MPs who were previously Labour but have been suspended or left the party since 2017. And we'll move to the alluring world of business now. New warning on global economic slowdown. A leading international economic organization has warned that risks to the global outlook have increased. It forecasts continued growth of around 3% but warns that the risks have increased. The report says a lack of direction on climate policy is holding back business investment. Although the OECD is not forecasting a recession, it's a decidedly downbeat report. There are calls for action from governments to address challenges, some of which have both long-term and more immediate consequences. Climate change is perhaps the most striking example. The OECD says extreme weather events could lead to disruption of economic activity and could inflict long-lasting damage on capital and land. They could also lead to what the report calls disorderly migration flows. Insufficient policy action could increase the frequency of such events. There is clearly a long-term challenge for governments in addressing these issues, but the OECD says that there is already an impact on business investment. In many countries, it is investment and trade that has been at the center of weakening economic performance. Apple loses money on phone repairs. Apple says it loses more money than it makes when repairing customer devices such as iPhones and MacBooks. Answering questions from US politicians investigating anti-competitive practices, Apple said it had lost money on repair services since 2009. Apple typically charges more than unofficial repair shops to fix things such as smashed screens, etc. But the company also said customers were free to obtain repairs from any repair shop of their choice. We'll travel through the scintillating world of science now. SpaceX Starship prototype blows its top. SpaceX Starship rocket prototype experienced a major failure during pressurization testing on Wednesday. A video from the scene in Texas showed the top part of the vehicle rupture. Cryogenic propellants that were being loaded at the time dispersed across the Boca Chica facility in a huge cloud. The US company built Starship as an all-purpose transportation system of the future. It will be used to ferry people and cargo off Earth and to destinations around the globe. The Mk-1 prototype was due to begin practice flights to an altitude of 20 km in the coming weeks. In a tweet, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk said that could not no longer happen and the ship would be retired. Development work is already being directed at another prototype labeled the Mk-3. Mk-1 had some value as manufacturing pathfinder, but flight designs is quite different, Mr. Musk told his legion of fans on social media. A statement issued by SpaceX read, "The purpose of today's test was to pressurize systems to know the max, so the outcome was not completely unexpected." Now to the stunning arena of sports. Lewis Hamilton on a tough season, the risk of racing and his future. Lewis Hamilton is explaining what keeps him hungry. How despite 6 World Championships, 83 Grand Prix victories and more money than he probably ever dreamed of, his desire for success in Formula One burns as bright as ever. "The thing is, I never got into it for money," the Mercedes driver says. Of course, it's great that piles up, no problem. That is a bonus as long as those things don't become the lead factor of what I do. The core of what I do is that I love racing, I love challenge. I love arriving knowing I have got these incredibly talented youngsters who are trying to beat me and outperform me, outsmart me. And I love that battle that I get into every single year. And that's all for the time being from the desk of news analysis. But before we end today's bulletin of news analysis, let's have a recap of the main points. Impeachment inquiry, Trump directed Ukraine pressure, Sondland. Johnson & Johnson loses vaginal mesh class action. Florida, 145 graves of an African American cemetery found under school. US federal execution halted over potentially unlawful methods. Essex lorry deaths, money raised for Vietnamese victims' families. Delhi pollution, the bars selling oxygen to choking city. UK to repatriate first citizens from northeastern Syria. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Be present with us in the coming episodes too. Thank you. Thank you very much.